Welcome. I'm Greg. Before I start, I first want to say thanks to James. I was thinking about James when you went over the space piece and you talked about how you could have done the presentation in 5 pages. I was like, oh God, that's me. So good start, and thank you for kicking us off. So welcome to Sales Skills. 1 in 5 people at NextJump officially work in sales. The other 4 do too. And if you think about kind of at NextJump, we're in sales or using these skills all the time. Everyone does 10X. We're all responsible for recruiting. We all talk to candidates. I think there are 30 to 40 NextJumpers that do run NextJump Academy. If you think about in terms of code for a cause, let alone talking to clients. Engineers talk to clients, product people talk to clients, everyone talks to clients. So I'm hopeful today in terms of kicking this off. We're going to start with 3 kind of fundamental, kind of 101 level kind of sales courses, from winning the first impression, setting up your environment, which Stephanie is going to run the next time, as well as negotiating with empathy from Tarun. We'll start then after that to start digging into more depth in terms of some of the courses. So kicking off today, winning the first impression, adopting an attitude of service. And I initially wrote out, probably early this week, I wrote to about 40, 50, 60 NextJumpers, asking you in terms of that first impression, when you have a first meeting, first conversation, what works for you, where do you struggle with? So first off, thank you for everyone that wrote, wrote back to me and kind of shared some of these. Here's some examples. Here's what I struggle with the most: building credibility. The hardest challenge I have is fear. I feel like I'm often lying if I put any sort of spin on something. I spoke to half a dozen banks, none of them biting. How do I generate interest? Turning around a difficult relationship. I struggle with being succinct. I'm mostly listening, but I've gotten feedback I come across as passive and don't contribute. So, I almost summarize these as this notion of kind of, I'm going to battle. And that's, I think, kind of a thought process that a lot of us have around, that first meeting and some of the kind of the emotion we put to it. So I thought I'd start off actually by sharing a lesson I learned really early on. So this is actually a picture of Charlie and I back when I think I was 22 in this picture. And I came to live with Charlie after I graduated school. And he had been running Collegiate Web, going through, and there were guidebooks at the time, so he'd sell print ads to local restaurants and service providers, et cetera. So I hadn't started. In fact, I had a full-time job that was starting in end of the summer at Standard & Poor's as an economist. And Charlie was in transition, moving to New York and going to Morgan Stanley. And I was helping him go and collect money from people that owed us and owed Charlie money. So there was a restaurant, it's actually still here amazingly, this is like 20 years later, called the Cambridge House of Pizza. And they had taken out kind of a back cover. They paid about a little over $1,000 for this, and they hadn't paid their bill. So this is like kind of the big account. I had to go into the restaurant and collect this $1,000. And I was beyond nervous. I probably never even had $1,000. $1,000 was seemed like so much money to me. I felt bad about kind of asking for it. And I remember I drove there. I got kind of out of the car. I stood outside the restaurant for about 5 minutes, just totally trying to psych myself up. I was doing like Rocky punches. I burst into the restaurant. There was like a woman working there. It was pretty crowded. There were about 10, 15 people. Of course, I went at like 1 p.m., which is around lunch. And I said, I need to talk to the owner. Finally, the owner came out. He was totally not pleased that I came and interrupted lunchtime. And I kind of stammered and I said, I have you took an ad out in Collegiate Web and here's the bill and I really need you to pay this money. So needless to say, it not only did not go well there, I think he basically threw me out of the restaurant. I never collected that. I tried many times afterwards. But the biggest part on that was I had such a fear of sales out of that, looking at his face and like his disgust and how I'd had that first impression. I remember coming back to NextJump 2 or 3 years later, kind of full time, and telling Charlie, as long as you don't have me in sales. And, of course, I didn't learn about the arrogant piece, to probably about 10, 15 years later. I assumed it was sales, not the fact that I totally messed that first meeting up. So I relate in terms of I've now had many more thousands of kind of first impressions. And so I have a lot more practice now. But that feeling in terms of kind of feeling scared, not knowing what to do, feeling about me is something I know all the time. So we're going to pause. And before I get into kind of the first impression piece, I want to do a 2-minute exercise. So we're going to keep it to 2 minutes. So this is how it'll work. Everyone stand up. All offices stand up. Take a partner next to you. So it's match up 1-to-1. I'll give you 2 seconds. Shake the hand of the person next to you. If you are on the right, if you're the person on the right this way, you are, all right, hold on. You are the next jumper. If you are the person on the left, you are a student. We are at a career fair at Columbia. Columbia is in New York. I think some people are there today. If you're the student, you play the role of finding out about next jump. If you're the next jumper, whatever you think winning the first impression means, I want you to win the first impression. All right? 2 minutes. Go. All right, everyone. Everyone, if you can now please sit. Please sit. New Yorkers. I know it. Hey, New Yorkers, if you could now sit back down. Exercise is over, New Yorkers. It is fun talking about next jump to candidates. I understand. All right, so I can't do this in every office, so I'm going to ask some questions, but so I'm going to ask actually Jeannie and Yves to come up here, and but as I ask those questions, I think try to think about how you would answer either the next jumper or the student, and then we're going to do this exercise again at the end, and we're going to switch, and then we'll open up for Q&A at the end. But I think Jeannie, you were the next jumper, and Yves, you're the student. So I'll start with Jeannie. So here, come this way so you can see. So Jeannie here, who just passed PLB yesterday. Woo! But anyways, so Jeannie, you were the next jumper. So what was your goal when I said win the first impression? What was your goal with Yves?
Just I guess just telling him a little bit about next round, but not just the, what our business is, but also like what is like working here, like, the culture, and also I guess like just answering his questions, so it's not just like one-sided.
And how did you do? Did you win the first impression?
I don't know.
So that's what percentage of the conversation did you speak, do you think?
Probably 20.
20%?
Yeah.
And did you walk away feeling that Jeannie knew you as a person? Or would you if you'd been a candidate?
I would say so, yes.
All right, so that's not bad. That's not bad. All right, thank you. And think of that internally, kind of as in each of your conversations with those, and we'll come back to that. So some common mistakes in a first impression, and this is when I thought about this is when I'm at my worst. When I'm at my worst in terms of making a first impression, I'm focused on me. I feel the need to win, whatever that might be, and it depends on the different type of situation I'm in. Talking versus listening. I find myself doing the vast majority of the talking. I'm also unprepared in how to help. There was a CEO talk that we had several years ago from Bob Chapman. He came and he spoke about kind of his company. He was introduced to us by Simon. And one of the parts that I loved is he gave this example of Ritz-Carlton and kind of their credo, which he shared here, of we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. It made me think about when I go to a restaurant and I feel kind of the most taken care of and truly served. One of the things that always makes me feel special is when you have a waiter and I'm kind of grappling with what to choose at one dish or the other, and they make a recommendation. Like, they don't just kind of let me do it. In fact, some of the best waiters I've ever had, I'm tentative and I say, all right, I'll have this. I love Mexican food. So, say this like steak quesadilla. And they'll see the kind of the hesitation. They'll say, actually, happy if you'd like to order it, but this dish, the Choritos, are that much better. And that's someone that I walk away with being like, wow, they're like truly taking care of me, as opposed to a waiter that might be listening, but maybe they haven't eaten the food, they don't give recommendations for it. They're not truly at that one level higher in terms of serving. And I love this notion of this kind of Ritz-Carlton credo. We are ladies and gentlemen. It instills this notion of that individual has pride. They have pride in what they are worth as a human. They have pride in terms of what they're bringing to the table, but that notion of servicing other ladies and gentlemen. It reminded me more recently as I was putting this together, Adam Grant, who came and spoke to us, he's the kind of the giver and taker, had recommended this book about the truth about trust. And he actually had written a review about it. And it was this researcher, David Destino, who'd done this whole body of research on what it takes to build trust, how people are giving trust. And I'm boiling the whole book down into kind of two parts, but all the research showed it boiled down to really two things. The first one was what he called integrity, but does the person care about me? In essence, I translated back to that kind of the Ritz-Carlton, are they serving me? Do they care about me, hopefully at even the higher level? And the second piece is competence. Can they do the job? That could be also, do they actually know what they're talking about? It can depend on that situation. Now, depending on the situation, you may put more weight on either things. The example they gave, if you're a back doc, if you're going in for back surgery, you may not care if they care about you too much as a person. You want them to be a great fucking back specialist. However, they showed amazing research, even with physicians, when you go in. Physicians that take the time early on to truly listen about what's going on to the person and having them diagnosis, the outcomes are significantly better than when they start leading with their expertise right in the beginning. And ultimately, that part comes into this, what I call adopting an attitude of service. So I'm going to cover three parts: coming prepared, listening, and being a pure giver. So the first part in terms of the prep, some of the mistakes that I make is I don't even consider the other side as a person. The second piece is I put no thesis on how to help. And in terms of understanding the person, this is just an example of a recent meeting I had. I'll use an EPP example, and then I'll use an example even preparing for this. So this woman, Gretchen, she's a VP of manager. I had this meeting with Keybabe. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. It was kind of on my calendar. But I took 15 minutes just to look her on LinkedIn. I looked at her, where she lives, her age, her title, her experience. Now, I've done this more often on kind of EPP, so it takes me a little less time now to prepare. But I try to think and ask questions. What is it like being in her shoes? I also think just quickly of some data points of the industry she's in, program, news, kind of competitors, things about what's going on. What might she be proud of? What might she frustrated with? When I prepared for this, one of the things that I'm at my worst, even in a speech, which is not necessarily a one-on-one meeting per se, or one-on-one first impression, I'm at my worst when I think about, okay, how am I going to sound, how am I going to do this, versus even in a group setting like this, I think about how can I make Costa better giving a first impression? The things that ASA struggles with, how can I make ASA better at giving a first impression? That helps me settle down and remember what I'm here to do for. The second piece is Daniel Pink wrote we talk about it, the mastery kind of purpose autonomy. He wrote a recent book called To Sell is Human. And it's an interesting book. And one of the parts that really resonated with me that I've been really working on that I think has made a big difference is this notion of making it personal and giving it purpose. And so kind of two questions to think about. If the person you're selling to agrees to buy, now that's in a very sales part, will his or her life improve? And that's in a very personal standpoint. So I can translate this, if I think about from a recruiting standpoint, talking to a recruit, if they come to NextJump, do I believe they'll be a better person? I truly believe that. If I talk to an HR person, Gretchen, do I believe that if they have our service, that they'll be a better person from that? In this part here, I kind of wired my story that I truly do believe that if you can apply some of these lessons, it'll help you in terms of any conversation or relationship you might have. But the second piece is when interaction is over, so just this interaction, will the world be a better place than when you began? Which on some level sounds like so hokey, kind of pie in the sky, and perhaps it is. But I do think even like a quarter of an inch, if I can have any interaction with somebody, will they go away regardless of, do they choose me or whatever that part might be? Do they learn something? Will the world be a better place? And that's helped me kind of wire a story. When I think back to going into the Cambridge House of Pizza, it was all about me. And there's this notion, even that $1,000, for instance, in terms of the back page cover, it didn't even dawn on me to think about, wait a minute, he needs more customers. He has amazing pizza. He's still around 20 years from now, so he was proud of what he did. Did I think about if I could bring him more customers and all the work that, really Charlie had built with that, what that could have done and really it potentially made and improved what that, that owner did. Didn't even dawn on me. The second piece is listening as an act of service. Feeling as though, two mistakes I make is feeling as though I need to talk all the time. The second piece is knowing that I need to not talk. I then make another wrong assumption, is that the opposite of talking is waiting. And so what do I mean by that is if I'm TPing with Holly, for instance, I know she's talking, she should go first, I'm arrogant, so I should go last. But really what I'm doing is I'm just waiting until she finishes talking because I have a great idea in my head and I'm going to go next. And I make that mistake all the time. Megan had shared this slide at kind of the FI. We've talked about this before in terms of the power of listening. People buy with their hearts and back it up with their brains. And I love this. When you give someone 45 minutes of your time, truly listen to them, they'll talk about you for a lifetime. And one of the parts that I think about is people feel really powerless when they think nobody's hearing to them, nobody's listening to them. They feel like they're just not being heard. But they feel in control, they feel powerful when they truly feel that they're heard. And they're certain that somebody is listening to them. And I think it's a good, reminder as I go into these of what that power of listening is. Now we're going to have, I'm teeing up a separate course. Rachel's taught this before, and I've asked her to tee this up for a future kind of one of these First Friday classes around kind of the reflective listening skills. She also has one on this effective confrontation as well. But just the basics, to give you a little tease on this, is 5 kind of basic skills on this. attending behavior is being fully present. So if you think about it like in person, you're kind of engaged, you're looking at them, your energy is facing forward. On the phone, one of the things I try to do is stand up. I find when I stand up, I just have more energy and it comes through a little bit more in the tone and the kind of the engagement of it. The acknowledgments, those are more verbal cues in terms of telling people that you're tuned into them and that you're listening. Door openers, when you have that start of a pause and they're kind of done, I oftentimes will then just start moving in, as opposed to door openers are encouraging others to keep going, to talk more. Silence, and this is a real challenge for a lot of us, certainly for me, is wiping your mind clean so you don't like start going into like, all right, my 5 ideas next, but truly keeping it, your mind kind of quiet, giving some silent time to truly kind of listen and let them keep speaking. And lastly is the reflective listening piece of proving to the person that you're speaking with that you're understanding, trying to rephrase it, reframe it, clarifying if you don't quite understand it. That goes a long way. The third part is being a pure giver. And some of the mistakes I make is focusing on what I want, focusing on what we want versus how to help. And believing that I must close. Whatever that might be in that situation, I feel like I have to get a win. Adam Grant, again, sharing this, we've seen this before, but you think about it in the terms of, he calls the most successful people are givers because they're balanced and give and take in the long run. As you start a relationship, though, this is first impression. I know I got a lot of questions on, I'm so worried and I feel like I'm giving, but I'm getting taken advantage of. How do I balance that? Future class. For this one, though, in that winning the first impression, if you start as a matcher and taker, you're going to end up at best in the middle. If you start as a giver, you're giving yourself a shot in building a relationship, which will be there on the top. So mistakes we make in trying to give, just a few things, and I've seen this, I've done this, and people assume like asking the question, let me know how I can help. Sounds like a kind of a giving comment, but it's really not. In the sense of if you've done your prep, if you've done kind of like your work and really listened to them, take a shot at actually trying to help them. That statement actually puts the work back on the person that you're supposedly trying to help. You're making them come to all the conclusions, articulate perfectly what they want help in. The second piece is providing too much information. Third part is asking questions without genuine curiosity, right? And it's that notion of, okay, I have a list of 3 or 4 questions I'm going to ask. Here's one question. Give me your response. Boom, I'm on to my second one, right? There's so much input into a question. There's so much what's called kind of offers in there. They're giving out some signals in terms of what's on their mind, what they want to talk about. As soon as you kind of move on immediately to the next one, you're sending a signal out that you're not listening. If I had one tip, you feel all that stuff there. One of the things that I've been practicing and I find it's been very effective is showing gratitude in whatever situation. I got some back from the knock in terms of when I asked questions what they struggle with. And one of them was like, well, I talk to vendors and we're kind of in control, so I really need more help on the negotiation. Perhaps. But even in a situation where you feel that they need us more than you, like I wouldn't underestimate the power of showing gratitude for the time they took, the care they may have put of expressing kind of their maybe it's their business, their idea, who they are, etc. It goes a long way in terms of setting that signal out that you care about them. It also helps me in terms of just setting my mindset. When you kind of show gratitude, it forces you to, unless you're just blowing it off, to really think about, being in their shoes. So going back to kind of what I hope is, and what actually not even hope, we have as a Next Jump Credo, is our version of the Ritz-Carlton. So that's Lay. For those of you who don't know him, in our Boston office in his nice tuxedo. Our why is to do the little things. This is the back of our recruiting shirt. So everyone that's been kind of in campus recruiting right now, you've worn them, to do the little things that allow the others to do the great things they're meant to do. Right? We do great things. We have pride in who we are, and we're serving others so that they can do the great things. It's very similar. And I think it's something that I hope that kind of got out of a different change in approach and how you think about that first impression. So we're going to end, and then we'll do Q&A. Same partner, swap the roles. The student becomes the next jumper. There's nothing better than practice. This is a startup practice. We have lots of different places to practice this, but try to apply some of the things from today. Go ahead. All right, everyone, you can take a seat or start getting back to your seat. New York loves this exercise. All right, so if you can get back to your seat real quick. New York. All right, so now okay, so I hope that was helpful. We're going to open up for some questions now. In the very least, we've now had some dry runs ahead of Super Saturday. What I thought we'd do is start in the UK office, and we'll ask some questions. We'll go to New York and then to Boston, and then if we have a few extra minutes, we can open it up to anybody. So we'll start in UK. Any questions?
Hi, Greg. It's DeVille here.
Hey, DeVille.
Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so you mentioned that after the first conversation, you want to feel like the world is a better place, before starting that interaction. So I don't think I understand, so maybe we can explain that more. For example, I'm imagining myself pitching financial products and talking to new merchants for financial products, and I just don't understand how I can, after the conversation, make them feel like, well, it's a better place.
It's a good question. So just trying to summarize it in terms of understanding the world is a better place concept, I think you're referring back to, I'll go back a little bit. Make it personal and give it purpose. And so what I kind of meant by that, and I'll use kind of the financial product, I'm making some assumptions in terms of what you might be kind of selling there. But it sounds like maybe to merchants to participate in the financial channel, is that somewhat correct? I'll assume it is. But I think the main point on this is one, whoever you're speaking to is first off is a person. So these types of questions get into to put me into kind of the mind frame of, will they be better off in terms of if they participate in this channel? Will they be better off kind of individually? So that might be that person is responsible for the budget, for instance, or the sales volume for the financial channel, right? So when the interaction is, will the world be a better place? So for instance, one of the things I'll think about on the merchant side, because I've worked with many of the merchants, I think about, okay, well, they have something of value from a financial service product. And what is that part? Is there something that'll help the employees of our clients in terms of helping them save money maybe to buy a home, to be something unique in terms of they can't find anywhere else? I think about beyond just that individual person is if this kind of interaction and how we talk about, if it goes well, maybe there's things that we can educate that person about the employee market, about kind of clients, and how to treat others. I try to elevate it beyond just going in being like, I need to make a lot of money from this financial channel. I'm under pressure from Kevin McCoy to get so many results to show the transaction revenue for what I need in the financial channel. I try to take that step back and think about that person I'm speaking to as a person, but then even one level higher of all of this is going to help employees. It's going to help, maybe there are parts I can educate about how we run our company or that sort of thing and build trust that they could maybe run a better company. I think about those thoughts and it puts me in a different mindset than from an approach of what do I need out of this. Does that help, Devel?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Anyone else in the UK?
Hi Greg, it's Mustafa here in the London office. Do you have any advice regarding managing a relationship in which the other person is a taker? So this can be professional and personal life as well.
So I do think that's a somewhat separate course in the sense that I think this is the part here is kind of the start of the relationship. So in some level, I will tee this up for you to come back. What I would say though is, and I got this question before, is how do you step into a difficult conversation? I know I'm worried. I've heard that this is difficult. They're upset. I've never spoke to them. Other people have. Sometimes you'll get someone and be like, oh, that's the worst person. That the perception is a taker. I would still apply the same pieces in the sense of I'm sometimes surprised, like, at my worst, I'll go into those things, make assumptions that they're a taker, and I'll go right in kind of attack mode. As opposed sometimes of to that notion of really listening and really having them feel heard. Sometimes they just may feel out of control because they don't feel really heard, and whatever that situation might be it could be someone in NextJump, it could be their boss, it could be somebody else. And I'm always surprised, and often pleasantly surprised, if I can start in the point of really having them being heard, all of a sudden some of those barriers come down and I can understand them better, and in fact, I can make some progress with it. But again, in terms of like those kind of, and I've gotten a few in terms of, I'm in an existing one and it's gone on for a long time and they're a real taker. I'm going to have you hold that question a little bit, and we'll, at least I have +1 in that course. So we'll come back. Is anyone in New York?
Yeah, Greg, can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Tom.
So we collected a few questions. We're going to try to read them this time and see if that
Okay,
was,
thanks, Tom.
Collected. So the first question from one of our Code for a Cause partners, sorry.
That's Tanner.
Tanner, is this, how do you apply enough pressure to create an environment for sales to perform as a giver? So kind of the tension between being a giver and actually creating the pressure that makes sales happen.
I think I struggle with it. And in fact, I think the pressure is actually leads to behavior of being a matcher at best, a taker at worst. So I think about it, and one of the things that's on my mind a lot is how do you override that pressure to help people be a giver first? And it takes a more long-run view. And so one of the parts that helps me is oftentimes, especially in brand new relationships, how many go wrong and how often like do they just not like end up being where it is. So in some ways I kind of, by remembering that, it's kind of like I call most of the times when I go in, when I'm in the pressure anyways, don't work out. So it's not like it's really working, which allows me to kind of take the other approach and be more confident in going through the giving piece. So I think in general, what we find is, salespeople have kind of pressure to get results. That pressure is there. I often think about how do you really set the environment up so in that beginning part, especially, people are really a true pure giver and not the matcher and the taker.
Awesome, thanks, Greg. The second question from Nyan, I phrase this slightly, is for insecure people, often don't go into kind of a sales relationship with a trying to win mindset, and they feel insecure.
Yeah.
And they tend to empathize with the client so much, maybe we get taken advantage of, or we don't kind of have a balanced relationship the way that we should have. What's your advice for that?
I actually think this kind of slide and point it can be really helpful combined with this notion of think about the other person and think about the other person and it's really about them, and combine that in the sense of again, what I love the Ritz-Carlton is I'm a lady and a gentleman. This question, especially the first one, gets at this is that like you have value. You have value in terms of who you are, your experience, like what you bring to the table. It could be, if again at NextJump, can you think about for that person, would their life be better at NextJump, or whatever that part might be. And I think spending some time on that question to kind of build up what I call kind of like the pride element, combined with it's about the other person, I think from a mindset standpoint, shifts the focus away from, am I saying the right thing? Am I going to sound, answer their questions kind of the right way? Shifting that focus out of that internal part more to the external.
The third question, Greg, from Laura. When I truly listen, I often need a long time to like listen and collect my thoughts, and then I can't comment or respond kind of productively right away. It's kind of like 10 minutes later you think, oh, this is amazing that you say. So how do you kind of be able to collect your thoughts and respond quickly and right there in the moment?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The two thoughts come to mind. One is, I think the prep ahead of time will allow you to, I think, come in with some theses. Now, the caution on that is you really want to listen and adjust and be flexible to those, if your assumptions change by new data points you get. But the second point I had is, I actually think that's okay in the sense of if you think about a long-term relationship and that you don't have to quote-unquote win that first one, if you were truly listening and they felt truly heard, and you have a great thought right afterwards, 10 minutes after that conversation, about how to help them or how to kind of give them, what a great follow-up, even 10 minutes away, to kind of show that you listened, and you're sending kind of a follow-up note of ideas you might have for that. So I actually think I think with practice you can get better at it, but I actually, Laura, to that point, I think the main point is to truly listen. If you're collecting thoughts and have a good one, I think it's fine, 10 minutes later, a follow-up. This is a longer run relationship you're trying to build. It's not, you don't need to feel the pressure to get it all done in that first meeting.
Any other questions here in New York? Dustin, scribbling lots of notes.
I can't articulate on paper. Are you
Want to speak? You can, here, come on up. You're Dustin's
a
coming.
little bit,
So it's probably coming from there.
Greg?
Hey, Dustin.
Greg. So I thought you mentioned something about asking a question like, how can I help you, is not necessarily being a giver. I thought that was a really interesting point. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what would be an example of a question or a recommendation that you could ask, or how you would position something to be a giver, and not just, I guess, be as vague as that can backfire, as you pointed out.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
It does. So let me try to give an example. We had an intern last summer who we made an offer to, he actually didn't accept. But I had lunch with him. And one of the things, as I listened to him, that he was struggling with is grappling with kind of the green card and the visa process and how it was, kind of a challenge for him. And, my first instinct, I actually didn't know how to help. My first instinct, but my first instinct was just to be like, okay, if there's anything I can do to help you, just let me know. And that was my first thought. Then I thought, wait a minute, we have a whole team of people that kind of know about that. And I said, one of the things they're working on is actually summarizing for internal people here at NextJump what's the process like for a green card and a visa. Would it be helpful if I send that to you? And I guess my point on this is it takes a little bit extra thought in terms of what might be helpful to him. Now, he might have said no, but I think the point is there's an element of kind of laziness by, in the sense of, how can I help you? And leaving it at that versus like taking that extra step of being like, if I'm truly caring about them, they may not articulate exactly what they need help because they may not know. But if I truly attempt at kind of caring about them, I'm going to take my shot at whether I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, my own personal experience, and taking a step beyond just the question. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Of course, you then need to like follow up and actually do it when you say it, but that comes later in keeping credibility. Questions in Boston? Oh, go ahead, Albert.
I was saying, go ahead. We're questions in New York, and go ahead. In Boston.
Questions in Boston?
Yes.
Okay, Gene has one.
So, nowadays, the typical platform, more often than not, for first impression is email. So, how does this content, does it apply 100% to email, or the tweaks to it, or?
Mm-hmm. So Gene asked, if you're doing this kind of that first impression from an email, I am thinking of because I got a number of questions on this, like a second class or a deeper class, kind of a higher level, and kind of cold emails or kind of that first part. But I think the principles stay the same. And I think I get a lot as kind of like on LinkedIn from business development stuff, people assume they ask me for anything from IT or help with salespeople. And, you can tell the difference when I feel like I'm one in 1,000 people, that they're reaching out to. I can tell when someone's like done like research on NextJump, or they're taking a thesis of like what might help me and where I might struggle with. I think it's hard because they're having to make some assumptions because they've never actually spoken to me. But as opposed to, okay, well, what do I want? I want him to buy something or whatever that part might be. So I think the principles that I think we spoke about today of doing your prep, making about them, what are the problems that they might face, what are their what are in their shoes, goes a long way than the reverse part of kind of what do I want. Stephanie?
So as much as hard as you might listen and like be in that like giving mentality, like there's times when the other person on the other end of the conversation is just very short, not very open. Like how, with all the door openers and everything, like how can you further engage them to, even if you want to listen, they might not reciprocate that like action that you're looking for.
So Stephanie asked the question of okay, so you try kind of the listening, but the person on the receiving end is not engaged or not really talking, something else is on their mind or you can't get at it. And so I hope Nick doesn't mind. But I'll use an example with Nick where he came kind of in a situation workshop. He'd had a client meeting where it was a program review, and the person was, I think, exhibiting that, was just like, was kind of late, was rushed, like wasn't listening and that sort of thing. And one of the recommendations I had is he got started and it was clear that they had other things in their mind. It would have been better for him to say, it's kind of call out the elephant in the room. It sounds like you have a lot on your plate. Why don't, go back to what, you're doing, and at a better time, we'll pick this up. And I think my point is, if the focus again is on them and those are the situations that they have, I mean, it could be a problem with their boss. They may feel under pressure with it. You could take some shots of what might be on it, but I think it's the burrowing further of what we want is when it manifests into that signal, that the challenge that Nick will have going into it next time, and I've done this a million times, is the next time he has that conversation, she's going to have an impression of Nick that he really just wants what he wants. So, and again, if you think about that in a relationship in a longer term, you're more okay with saying that, like, okay, yes, it's not going to be someone that's progressed. This one is not my thumb up meeting for the week. But from a relationship standpoint, he listened, he read the signals, and he responded of what might be helpful to her versus himself. Sorry. Kasim?
So you said that a lot of the success of going with the attitude of service depends a lot on how well you're prepared. And I completely agree with that. My question is, the example that you gave is you prepared on a Gretchen person from LinkedIn or whatever. Let's say there were no resources for you to prepare when you go into a meeting.
Yeah.
Like, are there any tactics that you follow on the fly to sort of counter that? Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah. So Kasim asked a question, if you don't have time, maybe you don't have time to prepare, but there have been times when, it could be like, okay, Greg, I want you to, figure this out, and I have very little experience. I actually don't know even really kind of what to prepare for. Maybe I go to Columbia and it's like a surprise. I just go to Columbia. I haven't had time to read anybody's resumes or any of that stuff. I think it happens. And in those moments when I'm at my best, I really, really try to focus on kind of listening. And, I do think I may take a shot at and even ask, what's on your mind as you struggle kind of going through and evaluating on these, things. So I may ask some questions that kind of get at, curious of what's on their mind, but I really probably at that point lead with much more curiosity in the beginning, knowing that actually I really don't know, and I'm kind of here to find out. I hope I can help, but in the very least, if I can really learn from what's on theirs, that person's problem may be the next 5 students in line behind them might be sharing that I can help them even better. So at least from an approach standpoint, that's what I think about.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, Albert.
I wanted to suggest if there are more questions that maybe you can help them offline, because we want to a few minutes before the next session.
Perfect. So yeah, I'll wrap up. Thank you, everyone. I hope this is helpful. I certainly give feedback in kind of the app. I want to hear if there are parts that weren't helpful, there are parts that were. I want to make sure that we improve this going forward. So, and to Albert's point, if there are any other questions or thoughts after this on a more personal level that you didn't feel comfortable asking, I'm happy to help. So, thanks everyone.
Thanks a lot.